On October 20, 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a landmark decision that could shape the future of gun rights in America for years to come. The case had drawn national attention, with both sides of the debate anxiously awaiting the outcome. In an 8-1 ruling, the court upheld a federal law that bans individuals under domestic violence restraining orders from possessing firearms. This law, originally passed to protect victims of abuse, was challenged as a violation of the Second Amendment, but the justices found the restriction to be constitutional. The decision makes it clear that the Second Amendment right to own guns, while fundamental, is not without limits. The court emphasized that certain restrictions, especially those aimed at protecting public safety, are consistent with the nation's legal traditions. The justices pointed to America's long history of regulating firearms, especially for individuals considered a credible threat to others. They argued that such measures are not new, but rather part of a broader effort to balance individual rights with community safety. For gun safety advocates and survivors of domestic violence, this ruling is seen as a crucial victory. They believe it will help prevent tragedies and save lives by keeping guns out of the hands of those who pose a danger to their loved ones. On the other hand, gun rights supporters express concern that this decision could set a precedent for further restrictions. They argue that the ruling might open the door to more limitations on gun ownership, potentially eroding constitutional freedoms. The ruling highlights the ongoing and often heated tension between the values of individual liberty and the need for public safety. It reflects the deep divisions in American society over how best to address gun violence while respecting constitutional rights. As the nation continues to grapple with gun policy, this Supreme Court decision stands as a significant chapter in America's evolving and contentious debate over guns, rights, and responsibilities. The Second Amendment, ratified in 1791 as part of the Bill of Rights, is one of the most frequently cited and hotly debated passages in the U.S. Constitution. Its words have echoed through American history, shaping the nation's laws, culture, and sense of identity. The text reads, "Raida, eds raidrie," well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. These 27 words have sparked centuries of interpretation and controversy. Americans have long debated whether the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to own firearms for personal use, or if it was intended to guarantee a collective right tied to the existence of state militias. This fundamental question has fueled passionate arguments in courtrooms, legislatures, and living rooms across the country. For many, gun ownership is deeply woven into the fabric of American life, a symbol of freedom, self-reliance, and the ability to protect oneself and one's family. For others, the widespread availability of guns represents a grave public safety concern, as the nation grapples with the tragic consequences of gun violence. Gun control advocates point to the United States' high rates of gun violence, mass shootings, and accidental deaths, calling for stronger regulations such as universal background checks, red flag laws, and limits on certain types of firearms. They argue that these measures are necessary to save lives and protect communities. Every Supreme Court case involving the Second Amendment has the potential to shift the delicate balance between personal rights and government regulation. Landmark decisions such as District of Columbia versus Heller and McDonald versus Chicago have redefined the scope of gun rights in America. These ongoing legal and cultural battles reflect deep divisions over what it means to be American and how the nation should balance individual liberty with collective safety. The debate over the Second Amendment remains a powerful symbol of the country's enduring struggle to define its core values. The recent decision centered on Zaki Rahimi, a Texas man under a domestic violence restraining order. Despite the order, Rahimi kept firearms and was involved in multiple shootings. He challenged the law, claiming it violated his Second Amendment rights since he wasn't convicted of a felony. The Supreme Court disagreed, ruling that temporary gun restrictions for those deemed dangerous are constitutional. The justices cited historical traditions of disarming dangerous individuals. The decision affirms that protecting victims of abuse can coexist with gun rights. The court drew a clear line: gun rights end where credible threats to others begin. While the Supreme Court's ruling is clear, enforcement in states like Texas is lacking. Texas law mirrors the federal ban but has no structured process to ensure abusers surrender their guns. Survivors often remain at risk, as compliance relies on the honor system. Without enforcement, protective orders can feel meaningless. States with strong gun surrender laws see fewer intimate partner homicides. advocates urged Texas to create mandatory processes for firearms surrender. Until then, the law's promise of protection remains unfulfilled for many. In 2022, the Supreme Court handed down a landmark decision in the case of New York State Rifle and Pistol Association vs. Bruin. This ruling fundamentally changed the way courts across the country review and interpret gun laws, ushering in a new era of legal uncertainty and debate. The court declared that any modern gun regulation must be consistent with the nation's historical traditions of firearm regulation. In other words, if a gun law today doesn't have roots in the laws and practices of the 18th or 19th centuries, it could be struck down as unconstitutional. This new standard has sent judges and legal scholars scrambling to search for precedents from centuries ago. They must now compare today's complex issues, like high-capacity magazines and semi-automatic rifles, to a time when muskets and single-shot pistols were the norm. The task is daunting, and often the historical record is incomplete or ambiguous. As a result, the Bruin decision has triggered a wave of legal challenges. Many existing gun laws have been called into question, and some have already been overturned, sparking heated protests and passionate debates across the country. In response, the Supreme Court's Rahimi ruling offered some clarification. The court explained that a modern law doesn't need to be an exact copy of a historical law. Instead, it just needs to be analogous, like the long-standing tradition of disarming people, considered dangerous to society. Still, confusion and disagreement persist. Judges are left to interpret what counts as a valid historical analogy, and how to apply centuries-old principles to today's vastly different world. The legal landscape is shifting, and courts are struggling to keep up. The battles over gun control are far from settled. Both sides, those advocating for stricter regulations and those defending gun rights, continue to clash in courtrooms and on the streets, with each new ruling fueling further controversy. The Supreme Court's recent guidance is shaping the future of gun regulation, but it has not provided all the answers. Instead, it has left lower courts, lawmakers, and citizens grappling with difficult questions about how to balance individual rights with public safety. The challenge of reconciling America's historical traditions with the realities of modern firearms and society continues, ensuring that the debate over gun laws will remain a central and contentious issue for years to come. Since Bruin, lower courts have issued conflicting rulings on gun laws. Some judges demand near-identical historical precedents, striking down modern regulations. Others allow for broader analogies, upholding some restrictions for public safety. This patchwork creates confusion for citizens and law enforcement. The Supreme Court's role is crucial in resolving these conflicts and providing national clarity. Until then, legal uncertainty and lawsuits will persist. Supreme Court rulings on guns directly impact American lives and community safety. Upholding restrictions can protect vulnerable people, while expanding rights can increase public anxiety. These decisions force lawmakers to constantly reassess gun policies. The debate over the Second Amendment is central to America's identity and values. The court's rulings don't end the conversation, they shape it for generations. As legal battles continue, the balance between liberty and security remains at the heart of the national debate. The future of gun rights and regulation will be defined by these pivotal decisions.